There are no shadows in the Underdark. Only after years on the surface have I come to understand the significance of that seemingly minute fact. The significance of the contrast between light and darkness. There are no shadows in the Underdark, no areas of mystery where only the imagination can go. What a marvelous thing is a shadow. I have seen my own silhouette walk under me as the sun rode high. I have seen a gopher grow to the size of a large bear, the light low behind him spreading his ominous silhouette far across the ground. I have walked through the woods at twilight, my gaze alternating between lighter areas and catching the last rays of day, leafy green slipping to gray, and darkened patches where only my mind's eye could go. Might a monster be there? An orc or a goblin? Or might a hidden treasure, as magnificent as a lost, enchanted sword, or as simple as a fox's den, lay within the sheltering gloom? When I walk the woods at twilight, my imagination walks beside me, heightening my senses, opens my mind to any possibility. But there are no shadows in the Underdark, no room for fanciful imagination. All, everywhere, is gripped in a broadening, continual predatory hush and a real, ever-present danger. To imagine a crouched enemy or a hidden treasure is an exercise in enjoyment, a conjured state of alertness. But when that enemy is too often real and not imagined, when every jag in the stone, every potential hiding place becomes a source of tension, then the game is not so much fun. One cannot walk the corridors of the Underdark with his imagination beside him. To imagine an enemy behind a stone might well blind a person to the very real enemy behind another. To slip into a daydream is to lose that edge of readiness, and in the Underdark, to be unwary is to die. This proved the most difficult transition for me when I went back to those lightless corridors. I had to again become the primal hunter, surviving every moment on that instinctual edge, a state of nervous energy that kept my muscles taut, always ready to spring every step of the way. The present was all that mattered, the search for potential hiding places of potential enemies. I could not afford to imagine those enemies. I had to wait for them and watch for them, react to any movements. There are no shadows in the Underdark. There is no room for imagination in the Underdark. It is a place of alertness, but not aliveness, a place with no room for hopes and dreams.
The Underdark, Deep Earth, the realms below, the night below, the lightless lands. Surface dwellers refer to the maze of tunnels and caverns beneath their feet by these names and many more. I have heard that other worlds are not nearly as honeycombed with tunnels as the one in which I was born, but I can only speculate as to the reasons why. For eons, earthquakes, volcanoes, and great rivers of water have cleaved caverns and chasms in the bedrock. Creatures such as purple worms, umber hulks, and zorn burrowed tunnels through earth and stone in search of minerals and prey. Beholders disintegrate columns of stone. Dwarves, gnomes, and other races mine for gold, jewels, and other precious treasures. They reroute subterranean rivers and transform the realm of Dumathoin and Caladuran through feats of engineering. The weave has undoubtedly played a crucial role in the deep earth, for vast cavern networks suddenly appear from time to time, leaving pockets of Underdark radiation, known to the Drow as Faerzris, in their wake. And races flourish. The Underdark is a world unto itself, a nightmarish labyrinth filled with horrors unimaginable to those who bathe in the daily light above.
While nature has certainly taken root in the tunnels that crisscross Aber Tiril, Deep Earth is dominated by malevolent beings whose ancestors, including my own, fled the purifying light of day for the cloaking darkness of eternal night. Despite their differences, however, the worlds above and below Chantia's gossamer robe are inextricably linked. Some who dwell in the realms above seek to explore the landscape beneath, trade with its inhabitants, and plunder the riches of its strange terrain. For the very same reasons, some who dwell in the realms below venture to the world above. The events of the past dozen years, especially the war between Menzoberranzan and the allied forces of Mithril Hall, and the emerging alliance between Lurur and Blingdenstone, have forged new ties between the bright realms of the north and the night below. The south, whence the ancestors of Clan Battlehammer emigrated, has long been intertwined with the remnants of deep Shanatar. To the east and west lie unknown realms above and below the surface, but I suspect that they too are more tightly linked than the inhabitants of either world realize. For those who would delve into the wonders and terrors of the Underdark, I offer this guide to the world I escaped but never left behind.
Getting in and getting out. Before embarking on an expedition into the Underdark, one must discover a way down. And, more important, back up. Finding routes usually requires deep research. Not every cave connects with the Underdark, just as not every upward sloping tunnel breaches the surface. Ruins, dungeons, and tombs are good starts. Many subterranean complexes were originally constructed by dwarves, and the stout folk often link their holds through a network of pre-existing tunnels. Even dungeons built by those ignorant of the Underdark sometimes link to it, for denizens of the deep are as likely to tunnel up in search of treasure as surface dwellers are to delve down. Magical transport is another way to reach the Underdark. Although less effective or reliable than one might wish, for reasons not well understood, Fadris inhabits and distorts movement spells such as Dimension Door, Teleport, and Teleport Without Error. Spells from the School of Divination and magical scrying devices are also affected, although these effects are far less well understood. Furthermore, the effects of Fadris on magical transport go beyond the immediate environs of such sources. Casters employ such spells only at great personal risk, even if the destination is well known. Generally, teleport magic does not reliably operate beyond a half mile. To confuse the issue, some Underdark regions allow spells to function more or less as expected. Explorers who seek safer magical transport into the Underdark are advised to find permanent gates that seem to function even near Fadris. Be warned, however, that gates are few and far between. Known gates are usually well defended on both sides. Escaping the Underdark is often more challenging than one might think. Even experienced explorers are easily lost. Maps and trails markers are generally less effective than above ground, as the very walls can move or disappear, and one cannot look to the stars for course correction. Magical navigation aids are highly recommended, including arrows of direction, known direction spells, and scrolls of mapping. Small, almost unnoticed tremors can wreak unexpected havoc on a planned return route, as can the deliberate or indifferent actions of burrowing creatures. Explorers are well advised to equip themselves with magical means of tunneling, such as dig spells or spades of colossal excavation. The enveloping darkness. The first challenge of the Underdark is the lack of light. For races adapted to life below ground, the ability to sense heat amply compensates for poor illumination. However, many surface dwellers, including humans and some halflings, are essentially blind in the Underdark. Alestro was kind enough to provide Capri with an enchanted cat's eye agate for a trip to Menzo Baronzon. It enabled her to see as well as a drow or a dwarf. Some wizards have access to spell formulas such as improvision that create similar helpful enchantments. Enchanted hotstones crafted by the Sniff Niblin enhance the range of vision by radiating heat reflected off the surrounding stone, providing the infravisual equivalent of a torch. Magical solutions such as these have the obvious benefit of not spoiling an ally's infravision. Although light sources in the Underdark draw attention, most inhabitants cannot tolerate strong light and keep their distance. Also, mobility and awareness are critical in the subterranean environment. Beings primarily reliant on sight to navigate have no chance of survival when blind. However, should your torch or lamp die, be prepared for a sudden attack from the fading shadows. Torches fashioned on the surface for the night hours are commonly made from dry wood soaked in pitch, but any flammable substance will suffice. If torch supplies run low in an Underdark environment, certain varieties of toadstool, identified by their deep purple caps known as torch stalks, provide a good, slow-burning alternative. Be aware that a few varieties of torch stalk are explosive when burned, releasing a cloud of spores that can slowly kill an individual if inhaled. In some cases, dangerous torch stalks can be identified by the bones on the surrounding cavern floor, remnants of the carrier and fertilizer. Unfortunately, in many cases the bones have been carried off by other predators, leaving no hint of the danger. Other sources of fuel are dried roth, dung, and bat guano, which burn well but smell like shit. Carrying a large supply of torches or oil is impractical for extended expeditions into the Underdark. So many explorers rely on magical illumination. Be forewarned, however, that such stormers can easily be dispelled or countered. An apocryphal tale, often repeated in the Waterhaven Tavern known as the Yawning Portal, speaks of an arrogant human wizard who relied solely on his spells for light during an extended Underdark expedition. He had to extend his entire roster of spells and got separated from his companions during a melee with a Drow patrol. The wizard found himself alone in the darkness, still carrying a spellbook, but unable to read it to rememorize a continual light spell. Not all the Underdark lives in blackness, of course. The rocks containing Phasris emit eerie blue and green light. Luminescent lichen, fungi, and mosses light many subterranean grottos. Although most varieties quickly fade if disturbed or removed, one species commonly cultivated by the Drow is blue glowfan fungi, which glows for several hours after being disturbed. The Drow also consume blue glowfan fungi. It is poisonous, however, to other races. Ormu is a fluorescent green moss that grows in damp tunnels and steamy caverns, usually near geothermal steam vents. Drow females often employed this moss in powdered form as eyeshadow. When mixed with glowworm juice, it forms a luminescent paint used for heraldic symbols and for scribing magical scrolls and tomes. Baruchis, also known as crimson splitters, are fungi that glow cherry red. If disturbed, they release a cloud of deadly spores that kill almost any creature except for the worm-like grubbers that feed on them. A related but more insidious issue for surface dwellers in a subterranean environment is the lack of their accustomed means of noting the passage of time. The sun does not rise or set, nor can one note moon phases or constellation drift. Tales speak of explorers who lost their way for just a few days, yet emerged claiming to have spent weeks or years below. The lack of familiar timepieces can create problems with identifying time to eat, sleep, or pray. Since ferrying a never-wintering water clock into the Underdark is impractical, most explorers turn to common subterranean measures. For example, Drow sentinels often measure the length of their duty tours by counting the number of times a stone basin is tilled by a constant trickle of water, emptying water into their water skins every time the basin is ready to overflow. Upper Underdark inhabitants measure days by observing when bats exit and return. Drow patrols often coordinate ambushes by counting hand fades, a unit of time based on how long it takes heat to dissipate from a rock after briefly placing one's hand on it. And I'll see you real soon with some more monstery goodness. If you stuck around this long, I thank you. Please smack that subscribe and assault that like button, and we'll get back to you real soon with some more monstery goodness. Until then, stay frosty and aware, beautiful people. Thank you. Thank you very much.